With the advent of Engine 3, it became apparent that we needed a new station. And so they looked around and they finally came up with the old Wellsboro steam laundry. That sat on this corner, approximately 45 by 75. Now, don't hold me to the exact measurements because I might be an inch or two off. But anyway, it was built right out to the sidewalks. Behind this building, along this road, there were two single houses. And so the borough used the first one for the police department, and the second one, I think they used it for storage. And you had an office when you come in the room, and then there's a little railing or something, and the borough secretary and the clerk had desk behind that. Then there was another office in back. Later on, that was our radio room. And then off of that, along the back side of the building, was a kitchen, maybe 8 foot by 15 foot. You know, stove, refrigerator, whatever. Now, also about this same time, we had what they call the Fire Chief's Contingency Fund. And I'm not exactly sure how it worked, but I'm assuming that the townships in the borough paid so much for the fire department. All right, after every fire, depending on which location it was, which township or the borough, that entity kicked in $20 or $30, whatever, to the fire chief's discretionary fund. Now, he could do anything he wanted to with that. If he wanted to take his wife out for supper, good. If he wanted to buy a nozzle, good. Now, one thing Gabby did do, when you come back from a working fire, and especially grass fires, he always had a cold case of beer in the refrigerator. And boy, did that hit the spot. All right, there's a lot of talk, too, about drunken firemen. Now, there might be a little insight to that. Years ago, there was a brewery in Galeton, Schwarzenbach Brewery. You go to the red light, turn left down Bridge Street, cross the bridge, and it was on the left-hand side next to the railroad tracks. Now, when you first come off the end of the bridge, there's Rhinewall's store, and then around the corner toward Clinton down, there's a couple of houses. And that's where I lived when I was a kid. And I also learned a healthy respect for electricity. Now, I was about 2 years old. And in our living room, we had a round table, and above that there was a chandelier with about 4 bulbs in it. Well, one day I was up there exploring the world, and one of the light bulbs was missing. So, being inquisitive like I was, I stuck my finger in there. You know, I still have a healthy respect for electricity. All right, on the brewery. I think my sister used to work over there part-time putting labels on beer bottles. And I had an uncle, Victor Bozick, in Galeton, or in Germania, that had a Model A pickup, and he used to deliver beer from the brewery to the bars in Germania. Now, in the 30s, the roads weren't what they were today. And he'd load that Model A up, go up toward Germania. Well, before you get into Germania, you know, you got a pretty good hill. Well, that Model A didn't have enough horses or gears to get that whole load up the hill. So he'd unload half of it in the bushes, cover it up with tarp, and deliver the other half. Then he'd come back down, get the second half, take that up and deliver. All right, then afterwards, I got to be friends with Ray Green. Now, Ray was a fire chief over there for 50 years. And he got talking about firemen's conventions. Now, the mode of travel back then was rail. So what they'd do, they would charter a train to go to these conventions. I think they were part of the B&O, but I'm not sure. And the rail yards were up between Patterson's Mill and the Gale Hose ambulance in that flat in there. So anyway, I think everybody in town must have been a fireman. But they'd load up the train up there in the rail yards and start off toward Ansonia, because the lines went from Galeton up West Pike along Route 6 to Addison, and then it came down along Pine Creek to Ansonia, where they hooked into the New York Central. And they also had a switch in Gaines that the line went up to Westfield and then down to Lawrenceville. All right, they'd load that train up to rail yards, and the last car was always an empty baggage car. So they'd take off for Ansonia. They get down past the brewery, stop, back up into siding, throw in about 400 cases of beer, then they were ready to go to the convention. Now, I'm not sure if they did a lot of firefighting study or if it was just an exercise to drink beer. But I wonder if that's where drunken firemen probably comes from. All right, meanwhile, back at the ranch, but in this case happens to be Crafton Street and Pearl Street. On the building, I was just trying to look at this tonight. When you come in, you had that small waiting room. Now, I don't think it was much more from here to the wall and to the wall. And the white or the red couches were part of the decor. Now, those couches, I have no idea who bought them, how they came by them, how old they are, but they were there in the fire department meeting rooms when I joined in '52. So those couches are old, and they're part of the history of this department. And now you pictured the people here tonight. This is the meeting room right here. If you wanted a seat, you better get there early. Because after that, it was standing room only. And then half the time, there wasn't even any standing room. You were all crowded into that one small space. The bays, they had 5 bays. The 2 in front of the kitchen were shorter, and so we housed the ambulances in those 2. Now, prior to that, the ambulances were held or stored at the hospital grounds. They had an old barn-like garage up there. So this is the first time that we had the ambulances and the fire trucks in one spot. So then they had the other 3 bays. We had the Mack, engine 2. Engine 1 was a 30 GMC, and then engine 3. And shortly afterwards, we got the patrol. All right, we called it engine 4 at the time. Today, it's a patrol. And so when we got the patrol, there was no room. So they took the 30 GMC and put it out at the end of the building and stored it outside. I don't know if we ever ran that thing after that. And then about 1960, they decided they needed a tanker. So we went down to C.H. Dillman and Son, who had their international dealership down below Bastion Tire Shop. And we bought a new 1960, I think it was a B190 International. 5-speed, 2-speed, 26,000 GVW. And we got a used tank body. Just an old gasoline tanker. Now that was about 900, I think 900 gallons. On the top compartments on the sides of that tank, where they used to store their hoses and so on, we had Frank Mahosky fabricate 2 rectangular tanks to slide in those slots. Now each one of those tanks held about 100 gallons. So that boosted the capacity up to 1,100 gallons. Now, you just think, years ago, you went out in the country with the Mac, 150 gallons of water. All right, then you got engine 3. Now you had 650 gallons of water. Then you got the Jeep, that was 150. So now you had 800 gallons. And then comes along the tanker with 1,100, but boosted it up to 1,900. We were in hog heaven. I'm telling you, we'd go out that door and we didn't have a qualm, we didn't have any inhibitions at all. We knew we could tackle anything. Well, as the case may be, you win some and you lose some. I'm not sure. I'm no public speaker. And I got to refer to notes. I think we'll let it go for tonight. And tune in next month for the next episode.